Hello and welcome back to another episode of What the Tech,
What
Dave.
the tick?
What up? What up? How's it
Hey,
going?
man, it's good. I'll tell you, that music still puts me in a good mood. I'm sure it'll eventually wear thin, but I like that
I,
opening
I,
gig.
I love it. I love it. I want to thank Ori for picking that out. You know, he's doing a fabulous job with us behind the scenes in the cloud and everything else. So shout out
Yes,
to
sir.
Ori, doing a great job. Dave, today we've got some stuff that is on lots of people's mind regarding crypto and cryptocurrencies, blockchain, and we've got folks making loads of money selling these NFTs, these non-fungible tokens. And I saw as of this morning another big thing that's happening is that Tom Brady is getting a group together with some serious heavyweights behind the NFTs, and he's starting his own company, not from himself, but it's a group of heavy hitters
Sure.
in the digital world to put out these NFTs. So
Yeah.
when you have these, Tom Brady's no he's a somebody, right? So
He,
he's pouring
it's
a
the
lot of
goat.
money. Not that it's a guarantee that he's going to make a load of money, but the folks that are on the board and that are part of this group are some heavy hitters within the business world. So
Yeah.
so there's more ammunition for NFTs going forward. So I'm sure he can put out a lot of different special collector's items along with other digital assets that would be of value.
It's going to be awesome. Every single day I'm learning something new about the topic. I have conversations with people recently, saying, hey, I had mentioned something about this upcoming show and our special guest. And they said, this is something that I need to tune into. I need to learn more about this. And I said, you should definitely join in because we have an expert that's
I
joining
know.
us.
Adam Mastrelli, he'll be joining us. He's in the green room right now. He'll be joining us in a little bit. So let's go right into it, Ori. Let's go right into the trivia question. You want to do this, Dave, or you want me to do it?
I will do this. You know what's really funny when I look at this? I'm looking at the picture on the left hand side, pretty darn close to this masterpiece.
Do you think we could probably get that as an NFT now that we're looking at it as well?
Well, if we can even get close to what the Da Vinci painting sold for, then I think we should definitely give it a try. So I'll take the lead on this. So the question is real simple. A lot of you might recognize this picture, this painting from Leonardo da Vinci. So this sold at auction. What did it sell for? 20, 60, 235 or 450 million dollars. I don't know the answer. I guess it could for me 20 million and 450 million. It's all the same. It's all the same. I can't
Oof,
spend it all.
it's a
But
lot of dough. It's
yeah,
a
so
lot of dough.
we'll
I
come
could
back and revisit that.
I could think of a lot of ways what I could do with either any one of those amounts.
Man, that would be fun. That would be fun.
Well, we'll have to see if Ori could put up that graphic, that little thing that he's got on there. That guy up for sale too on it. We'll have to talk about it offline.
All right.
See what we can get for it. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about Adam before he comes on. Adam Mastrelli he leads a sales team at IBM that's in the digital assets and banking solutions group. They work with institutions regarding exchange wallets, tokenization solutions, securing private key management, and he's also worked on other big projects in the past, like IBM Watson's. He's worked in the blockchain lab services and the blockchain ventures. Side note, Adam is a great MC. I've had the opportunity of seeing him up close and did a little bit of a gig myself with him a couple of years ago. So, Adam, if you decide to go into MC full time, I'm sure there'll be lots of corporate gigs that you could do, as well as wedding and bar mitzvahs. So, without further ado, let's bring on Adam Mastrelli.
Yes. Look,
Adam, how are you, man?
I'm great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for all the, coming from Long Island, I've been to a ton of bar, bot, and B'nai mitzvahs, and I can definitely say that I would make an excellent MC and host. Incredible.
It's been a while, and especially with COVID,
Yeah.
all that stuff was shut down.
Right.
And who knows? They're saying, maybe by summertime things will start getting a little bit more open up, and then maybe you could get into the MCing scene again.
Remote MCing is actually a thing. We have a group of colleagues actually do that. I mean, the event
Really?
space, yeah, remote colleagues. Steady Now Productions is the name of the company, and essentially what they're doing is, so just to give a little context, so IBM has a massive sales conference every year called Fast Start. And so Fast Start is usually about 40 to 50,000 sellers across North America, Europe, and then Asia Pacific. It's always in person, 3 different in the year. And what ends up happening is they couldn't do that in 2020 and in 2021, this year. So they had me go to a studio in New Jersey. And then we live streamed and we recorded all this stuff, but we did it remotely to 40 to 50,000 people over the course of 3 weeks with like a green screen in the background, and me walking to press things on a screen, very, very CNN kind of touching the screen type of stuff. And I think that's going to take it to the next level because people have already hit Zoom fatigue. So now you're going to have to make it so that everybody has their own little TV show. Everybody's on their own little program, right? And that's actually kind of basically there's a little bit of your NFT stuff, right? Everybody has their own little program. Everybody will have their own little digital version of themselves in the world that either gets shared or is then economically incented to share some version of that.
Well, it's interesting you say that. And I know we're going to talk a lot about crypto and NFTs. I want to just spin that back in one other way, because you're saying something that I'm hearing from other folks is the Zoom fatigue factor, but a lot of it seems from just a lack of, there's a production value to it, because nobody gets tired of watching Netflix. I haven't watched all the shows on Netflix.
Right.
And the other part is that a lot of folks, when you're on so many Zooms today and in Microsoft Team meeting, a lot of folks, the audio and video quality is just not there. And you don't want to stare at a screen that's just a black background with somebody's face on it, as well as hear somebody, be on speakerphone, and they're talking from over here, or their laptop's down here, or you're staring up at their nose, right? And I think that all of that, I mean, you're visual people and we hear things, and that's what you're doing if you're doing it all day. And that if I were to say production value is very low on a lot of Zoom calls. Yeah. And so you're just like, do I have to stay through this?
And then that fatigue is coming when you're struggling to be interested with what's in front of you. Then you're struggling to understand what you're hearing, and then it just turns to boredom sometimes.
Well, this has real ramifications, right? There's nothing worse than watching terrible programming, right? And then you go back and you say there's nothing worse than watching terrible PowerPoints, and right there's this very famous business school case about the Challenger disaster in 1984 around, that PowerPoint, the presentation of this was missed. There was a very clear miss on this, and it was because it was so tedious to go through these presentations that it was missed, basically due to poor presentation.
Interesting.
And so this has real world ramifications. So you can see where that will be exceptional in the future.
And so if you're watching this and you need to upgrade your video or audio, we'd love to help you.
Yes.
And if you need an MC, Adam is always there to help you with that production as well.
I'm in.
All right, cool. So Adam, we want to jump into the meat now.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm going to play you a clip from CNBC that talks a little bit about this sale of the Beeple NFT that went up for sale, and then we'll have some discussion around it on the other side.
Yeah.
So the Christie's auction for digital artist Beeple, whose real name is Mike Winkelmann, coming to a close a few moments ago. The final bid, David, $69 million.
Oh my gosh.
As of 6 months ago, Beeple had yet to sell any work, and most of America and the world are still trying to understand how NFTs fit into overall asset valuations. But
Carl, help me. Carl, help me understand.
I'm
relying on you and Morgan to explain this to me. I can say non-fungible. What is a non-fungible token? But that's about where my understanding ends. Yeah. All right. $69 million. Winkelmann. Way to go, Winkelmann. Way to make it happen. Beeple.
This is incredible too. I mean, this is the NFT situation has just kind of exploded onto the scene, and the numbers behind it. I mean, just to see $69 million. I'll tell you this: it's tied to the Ethereum blockchain, David. And if you take a look at Ether, which is the cryptocurrency tied to that, that's higher again today too. In fact, we have seen Ether outperforming Bitcoin as of late because there's some supply changes happening to that cryptocurrency. But yeah, it's like you Google NFT right now, and I know they've been covering it pretty intensely on Squawk Alley, Carl. But you Google it right now, and there's all kinds of explainers out there, and it's still, I have to say, a little bit confusing.
All right, there you have it. $69 million.
I love it. It's so reminiscent of, I don't know if you remember that old clip of like Bryant Gumbel and Katie Couric in like the early 90s talking about the internet. They're like, and the World Wide Web, what is it?
What is it?
I don't know what it is. Let's talk about it. So you're able to communicate. And this is like similarly reminiscent of that, because, really what, 69 million makes him, I think, the third highest grossing living artist alive, right? Well, a living artist. I think he's number 3 now. I saw recently. And so basically just the exciting part is that people are buying culture. This is no different than, and we can get into the technical aspects of it, but this is no different than, think like in the, 80s when, Jordan sneakers were big and, somebody wanted to own a piece of that. You were a big sneakerhead. Or you were buying vinyl, or you were buying art at that point. So in addition, we can talk about that. It's a staggering number, but I think the best way to look at it is this is a seminal moment in human history, really. And it's a cultural moment that the market, albeit, inflated and high, is willing to pay for that. And we'll see if it's a good or a bad bet over time. But I just think that to see this start to happen is incredible.
So you're saying, what I hear you saying is something like this just is a natural extension of just the progression of how we're either using cultural icons or art to sell items.
Right, without a doubt. And there's a digital component to this too that I'm going to back up a little bit. So if it's really all about like how you transfer value and who gets remunerated like for that value. So for instance, before the internet, right? If you had to call internationally, you would get a calling card. You would preload it, right? And you would then, AT&T or whoever your wireless provider, you would call up to that. They would take their cut, and you would call up to that amount, and it would say, please insert,
Right.
And so, that. Right. So that was how international calling was done. Then you fast forward, the internet comes along. Now, how do you call somebody?
WhatsApp or Skype or whatever.
Skype. And how much does that cost you?
Nothing.
Right. So this is a massive shift in like telecommunications that happened with the advent of this technology that we know as the internet. So then you fast forward. Now we said, now let's start sending emails. So that's messaging. Okay, now we can message over the internet. So if I have a Gmail account and Rolando, you have a Hotmail account, can I send you an email?
Of course.
Right. And we don't think twice about it. Right. But if I have, and you could be anywhere, you could be in Nigeria, you could be in Costa Rica, all around the world, truly global, right? And you could do the same with Skype or with most of these other things on the platforms. It's a little different. It's kind of platform agnostic, or non-agnostic. But with money, with value, and this is what Bitcoin solves for, is that if I have a Venmo account and you are in, Costa Rica and you don't have Venmo because Venmo is only, to be used in the United States, I can't send you that. Right. So for the first time ever, all Bitcoin is saying, and then we can get into what NFTs are saying as an extension, but all Bitcoin is saying is for the first time ever, I can send units of value anywhere in the world without a trusted third party that basically is on a shared ledger. Now, fast forward that. So we've done telecom. We've now done, there's email with the internet. Now we've done value with Bitcoin. all NFTs is saying, now I can tokenize any digital version of media, art, right? A JPEG, a meme, and have it be digitally native, and then send it anywhere in the world without a trusted third party or trusted intermediary. So if you don't think that scares the heck out of music industry, and you can recreate or do it differently, like music rights are one of the most difficult things in the world to unbundle. So that is very transformational for art, media, and how we, sell value in that way.
So we're basically going into a new frontier. And before we go further into the new frontier, I think you're teeing it up perfectly. So one of the things that we know that some folks are watching this or are very maybe advanced, but I would venture to say that a lot of folks are still trying to get their feet and their hands around this topic. So what I want to do first, before we really go into some of the nitty gritty, is start with what you were starting to touch on. What is an NFT for those that are laymen? And so we're going to play a little bit of sound and then come back and just make sure that we capture the right information on this. So Ori, go ahead and roll that first video.
I'm going to describe what an NFT is in the most basic terms I can. NFT stands for non-fungible token. Fungible means something is able to be exchanged or substituted and will hold the same value. It's interchangeable, like the dollar, gold, casino chips, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or frequent flyer loyalty points. If I lend you $10 cash and you return to me 2 $5 banknotes, I'm fine with that because even though they are different, they hold the same total value. They're fungible.
All right. So did we get the NFT fungible part before we go to the non-fungible part?
Yeah, you got what fungibility means. Everybody gets that. It's $1 for $1. Albeit, on a US dollar, right, there has a little, you could technically say that there's a little bit of a serial number that makes it a little bit different. But when trading $1 for $1, everybody says, okay, $1 is $1. They are fungible. They are exchangeable. Correct.
Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one, the non-fungible part.
Non-fungible obviously means it's an asset that can't be substituted. It has unique attributes that make it different from something else in the same asset class, like a painting, a theatre ticket, a house, a video game skin, a trademark, or a CryptoKitty, which was the first real use case to take off on the Ethereum blockchain in 2017. Some of these assets are physical and tangible, and others are digital and intangible. So NFTs are non-fungible tokens.
All right. That part, did we get it right?
You got it right.
All right. Awesome. So non-fungible, those could be tickets that are unique. I've heard of unique experiences where, maybe you could create a lifetime front row seat and backstage access to like a major concert, like 50 Cent or Bad Bunny or anybody of these can create an NFT based around an experience.
Yeah.
All right. Beautiful. So then we'll go to the third part, which is the last part of this, which is then the tokenization, which is what you were just talking about before we started this. So go ahead and roll that, Ori.
Refers to a digital certificate stored on a secure distributed database called a blockchain. So NFTs are digital assets, publicly verifiable intellectual property authenticated on a blockchain. A popular place to currently browse a variety of NFTs is on OpenSea.io. It's an exciting space. I believe the NFT space will continue to grow in the coming years, with some popular use cases being digital art, virtual land, gaming, collectibles, finance, and much more.
There we go. And that's where you left off, and we could pick up the conversation again.
Yeah, I mean, that's about right. I mean, it's a great explanation. So you can see that, a dollar for a dollar we get, the non-fungibility aspect we get, you can have something unique in the real world, whether that's physical. Christie's certifies that. Somebody determines this actually a Picasso, right? That's done now by people in the real world certifying. And we've seen there have been fakes, right? Nefertiti's bust potentially is, all this stuff, right, around and there have been some high level fraud that goes on. In this world, what he said about the token aspect is really interesting, right? So he's saying it exists natively on this big decentralized ledger that proves its authenticity and variability, right?
Right.
Well, it proves it, verifiability, right? Yeah. So it proves that. So in that way, now you say, oh, this gets really interesting. What do I value in the digital world? This is really like Ready Player One type stuff, right? If you're familiar with the book and the movie, there are people buying up digital land in either, you're familiar with Second Life, but Decentraland, right? Other type of virtual worlds like this. You can go buy land, right? And then have that land be available for sale in the future in a digital, in the same way that you would buy real estate in the real world. So a lot of those things just transferred, and what the blockchain does in this case, this decentralized ledger gives you authenticity and provability that those assets are actually living there and they're open. The difference with that would be, and a really good example of this is trying to build something on a centralized server. The example that people usually give is, do you remember Farmville?
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Okay, so Farmville was a Zynga company, right? And it was built on Facebook, right? Mm-hmm. Centralized company, centralized server. They're responsible for the platform, right? Can't be voted on. The community doesn't have a say in what happens. Facebook changes their algorithm, and Farmville's basically business evaporates overnight.
Right.
So this is a big danger, right? Yes. Now, in a centralized community, at least there would be votes on, if something was changing, you would see it coming, but there's really no algorithm to change a centralized place. It's all open. So I think that comes can you censor this in the future? I don't know. Can you censor the internet? Maybe some people might try to do that, but I think that's essentially what's going on.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah. I mean, it can see why institutions and even certain people may find this a big threat, because it from the decentralization aspect, it takes power away from those that are already probably invested a lot of power, a lot of money, resources, and time to establish that power or control over either events,
right,
currency, policy, and just the distribution of goods.
Yeah, and you're right. And let me just back up a little bit on what does it mean to tokenize something, because you'll hear a lot of well, my dollar's digital. Why do I need to tokenize a dollar? What does that mean? What does a token mean? And so the difference is this, right? Our dollars in a bank account are electronic versions of representations of money. They're just basically the bank telling the Federal Reserve, hey, take this IOU back and forth. They're not really just trading messages. It's not a bearer asset, right? It just lives on a server somewhere, just these IOUs floating back and forth. So, right, what happens when if your Wells Fargo account gets hacked or something like that, they're responsible for your money, FDIC insured. What happens if you're American Express? You're not responsible for fraudulent charges. So we're kind of used to this thing where if somebody gets our information, our PII, our personally identifiable information, it's okay. It's okay. We change a password. The difference with when you tokenize something, what they're essentially saying is that Bitcoin, NFTs, etc., work on a private and public key pair cryptography world where the token is actually a bearer asset. So you could think about bearers that my father did audit. He would have to follow a guy on a subway walking from bank to bank with $30 million of actual bearer bonds in a bag. And that means that the bearer of the bond, the person who holds the bond, is the bondholder, right? Yeah. And that's what you're only doing in the digital world. So that makes the private key very important. So if you hold the private key, you hold the bond. You own the Bitcoin. And in the same way here, NFTs, because they exist in the world of crypto and blockchain, in this case, they mentioned token standards. A lot of this is right now built on, and the token standard for NFTs on Ethereum is called an ERC 721. There's a few others, but that's the main one. And then, so basically that means that once it's tokenized, it is living on chain, and whoever holds the private key holds the access to that good, whether that's Bitcoin in this case, or this digital good could be, in this case, be an NFT. So it's a right, it's a to that, could be land, could be a skin in Fortnite, etc. Could be a music, piece of music.
It's funny, when we were talking earlier, you were mentioning, back in the late 80s, early 90s, the internet was new, and they were talking about it like it's this brand new thing. They needed understanding, and people would shed light on it.
Right.
This is so interesting to me. I'm sure within 10 years this will be very mainstream and everyone's going to understand it, but think about some of the applications for NFT. It sounds kind of like a better version of eBay.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, and that's for the example of OpenSea, right? Where there's like a few different areas. So like digital collectibles is that area, right? That's like collecting baseball cards, NBA Top Shot, this like collectible area. There's another really interesting area. Think of it like for gaming, which is not necessarily collectibles, but when you play a game right now, you jump in, you're buying a skin in that game. Yep. And you can't transfer that outside of that game, right? Parents have spent thousands of dollars. Parents have spent thousands of dollars to get their kids skins in a game that's non-transferable outside of that walled garden. So what's really interesting is like, can that skin, and they have this, but it's like a gray area. So can you open up the gray area and have a skin that I purchase in a game be able to be traded on an open market outside of that game, so that my $3,000 that I now, maybe I get $1,500 back, or maybe it's worth more. Maybe it's $4,000 now. I don't know.
Right.
Wow. It's definitely a fascinating. I find that fascinating. I actually feel a little bit reassured when you explain it, because it doesn't sound like, something that some guy in a lab designed, and a couple of his geek friends now like it, so it's kind of a trend. It sounds like it's got cryptography behind it. It's obviously got big people with money behind it. It's a system that's in place. It sounds like, to me, it's not only is it picking up steam, but it's starting to become sticky and starting to get legs under it, so that it becomes just a modus of operandi. It may not be the default mode, but it's going in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like just an extension of the internet in a way, right? And now you're getting to say, we're doing this with money, what we did with email, and now NFTs in this world, you can say, so decentralized finance, right, is a really good example of this that like nobody really understands. So think about it, and then we'll jump back to NFTs. Think about it this way. So John Wanamaker goes to Paris in the 1800s and then comes back to the United States and says, department stores, we're doing them. Basically, before that, there was a lot of markets. It was very decentralized. So Wanamaker comes back and creates a centralized model of retail, right? Bundles it all together. That's good for about 100 years. Then Amazon comes along, and Walmart becomes great by doing this to the nth degree on price, right? Then Amazon comes along with the internet and says, by the way, all that stuff you just bundled for the last 100 years, we're going to unbundle. And so if you look at it in retail, think about that for finance, right? Finance started very much like Dave, town. I'm in the center of the town. You're selling wine. He's selling rice. You don't want to be traveling to each other's towns. I'm midway. So I say, leave your rice and your wine at my place. And all I ask is that you start to, pay me a little cut, because I'm helping out. And so it starts to evolve, and over time it becomes more centralized. And what happens is Satoshi Nakamoto releases the Bitcoin white paper in 2008 around the financial crisis. And what happens is this like Cambrian explosion of unbundling, of a decentralization of finance. And then that's what DeFi means. It's kind of like an unbundling of all of, like, your bank does the lending, does the mortgages, does the, the margin trading, does the calls, does the options, all of this. Now there's not disrupting this. It's almost like a separate system, which will disrupt this, but it's a separate system built on this what we know as blockchain technology.
Well, you said something. You said something, Adam, that that is just teeing up, because I would also like to get your thoughts on. I'm sure you know who Scott Galloway is. He had a snippet on this with another professor recently, and I'd like Ori to play that footage, because you're saying it has the potential to threaten the financial system, really change it in the way we know it. So let's play that, Ori, and then we'll come back to Adam after that.
Through why the traditional finance companies or insurance companies are under threat or at risk of disruption by the blockchain or crypto.
The whole intent of blockchains is to cut out the middleman. That if you buy a life insurance policy, there are many steps involved where somebody has to underwrite the policy. You may get a medical exam, all kinds of paperwork and proof of identity and so forth. And everybody collects a fee for performing those services. And the point of crypto is to go immediately from your wish to own the policy to the creation of the policy with minimal outside interference, to let a robot do all of this work.
There you go. Which is kind of what you were saying, right?
Yeah. I mean, here's a really good practical example, right? So when you send $1 million on a wire transfer and then you send $100 million, they're going to charge you based on the size of the money sent, right? The fees involved. Crypto doesn't work like that. If you're sending Bitcoin, I mean, you've seen stories where you can send. It actually could go in reverse, where you could send $1 million or 10 million to 100 million, and the transaction fees are like very similar, because it doesn't work on sizing of cent of how much lifting. It's packaging on these things called UTXOs, which are unspent transaction outputs. So essentially, it's like it's different technologically on how that works. So that becomes really interesting. Why am I paying all these fees to these middle people that are doing nothing? And I mean, and look, I'm exaggerating this, right? Nobody's doing nothing, right? We've built up a system to do this. But what's happening is from what Bitcoin has achieved, you'll start to see people doing things like lending, insurance in a more peer-to-peer way with limited friction, lower fees over time, and more. What you'll hear a lot of is this phrase, smart contracts.
Right.
And
beautiful. So we've got one in there. Is that our next? Is that our next piece, or is that the third one, Ori? Okay, we're gonna get to smart contracts. Hold that thought. It says if we gave you the script for today.
Hey, Adam, if you're able to cut out the middleman and lower fees, is that a benefit for the buyer and seller? Is the buyer getting more value? Are they able to maybe buy something that costs less, or is the seller just making more money from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's how we'll cover it in smart contracts, but these are like dynamic agreements. So it could be that you set up an agreement in a smart contract that you always, as a seller, and it could be dynamic that it changes, or it could be static, and that's your rate, right? And it takes a little bit of the negotiation away. And if you want to hold to this rate as a seller, and the buyer then has his or her pick of who they go to. So I think it's really dynamic. My consultative answer on this is it depends. But I think what ends up happening is you'll see it starts to open up on cases that we haven't thought of, and takes out a lot of even the paperwork thing he mentioned, right? A lot of this can be simplified. Not everything gets done overnight, but I tried sign up for a pool membership the other day, and I had to fill out, 40 pieces of paperwork. It was like crazy. So the idea would be, if your identity is on chain, and some of this is done, you could do it non-custodial, which means you maybe want to be pseudonymous. But if you put your identity on chain, you could see the implications this has with healthcare and tracking for you see New York start to do this with IBM on tracking for a digital health passport. Right. Try doing that with paperwork. It's a nightmare.
I hope that happens soon, so that
they're
from the records-
piloting it. They're piloting it now, and
Really?
that's IBM with the state of New York doing this digital health passport. And we also have done stuff with Moderna around the COVID tracking vaccine, and then we also have a thing called Rapid Supplier Connect, which is basically if you are a supplier of, you'll love this in e-commerce, right?
Right.
Say you're a supplier of coffee filters, and now you want to start producing surgical masks, right? There's a lot, just to do that, there's a lot of supplier won't trust you. They don't know who this is, so you have to then pivot. So what basically Rapid Supplier Connect is saying, when you need to, inform your identity of you as a trusted supplier to a network, you can do that relatively quickly, or much faster than you would be able to do in with all the standard paperwork. So you can, with smart contracts, you can automate a lot of that stuff.
I can see how things can move so much quicker.
Right.
We've worked with suppliers around the world, and sometimes establishing those relationships and getting either lines of credit and lines of communication. We don't know you, I don't know you. Who have you worked with? All of that dance could be cut down in a matter of days rather than weeks or months.
Agree.
Wow, terrific. So Ori, let's tee up the next footage, because this is exactly what we're talking about now.
And routine financial transactions can be automated in a way that makes it both safer and quicker. The easiest example is trading stock. We had that fiasco with the Robinhood GameStop trading halt that occurred a couple of weeks ago. What caused that was the fact that stock trades take 2 days to settle, and they require people to post collateral as guarantees that deals will close, payments will be made, and so forth. But crypto can make those transactions occur instantly. And all the intermediate steps and all the people who are being paid to keep track of things and check on things basically evaporate from the equation. And that's really what the finance industry is vulnerable to. There's a lot of people in finance who just keep track of things.
All right. So when we're talking about automating type of transactions, I still find it crazy that we've got 2 days of trying to settle transactions in a modern era, when you think, this should just be instant, just nanoseconds, buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. And then you've got these bottlenecks that create essentially this GameStop situation. Yeah.
I mean, I think he's right on the aspect of bean counting, right? Of people, myself included. My job could probably be, automated away in the future.
You could be a bot, right?
I could be a bot
or something.
Exactly. I'm in sales, so maybe not. Try to stay close to the client, but in that way, he's right. I mean, the settlement so when you go to Starbucks to buy a coffee, it doesn't settle instantly, right? It's 3 days of risk technically, which is, much better than it was. I think it was up at 6 days. And so the legacy system is getting better, but it's still, there's a little bit of that float, right? The 3-day risk period between Visa, Starbucks, your bank. And that's just what it is right now. What Bitcoin is saying, if you're settling, or crypto in general, you can settle final settlement within, on Bitcoin, I think it would be within every block, every 10 minutes. So,
wow, and awesome.
It would, but now there's a trade-off, right? Now the trade-off is that you can only do 7 to 10 transactions a second. So so Bitcoin is a layer 1 platform. You'll hear this talked about a lot, like layer 1. And it's a very simple platform. All it does is transfer value back and forth. 7 to 10 transactions a second, blocked together. If you were trying to take that global, you couldn't scale that. That wouldn't scale. You would need, thousands to tens of thousands of transactions a second, right?
Right. For especially large companies.
For large companies.
Marketplace or large company, you need more than that.
Right. So now, so this is the trade-off. So that's a layer 1 platform. And there are people trying to solve that scaling problem for Bitcoin, which is like Lightning Labs, Lightning Network, all of this stuff, which will be basically like side chains, or kind of, can I do a layer 2 solution that scales up Bitcoin and makes it run faster? So, and that's all just sending Bitcoin back and forth. There's the smart contract aspect, which is what Ethereum was solving, which is what if we could not only send value, but what if we could make it programmable? So this is like then programmable money. And just clear and simple on what a smart contract is, it's basically like a soda machine. So everybody's familiar with a soda machine. You put $1 into the soda machine, you hit the Diet Coke button, or whatever you're doing, you hit the soda and it returns 50 cents to you. Like the machine, that's all a smart contract is. And you can see how exotic you can get with different smart contract platforms on what rules you would like to set up for the transfer of value. So that's what Ethereum and other solutions try to solve.
Awesome. Well explained, Adam. This is one of those things where you really have to be in the trenches, which is what you are. You're in the trenches, so you have a very good grasp on this. And I think a lot of folks that are going to be watching this are going to find this of value because there's a lot still to be learned. There's a lot of things to uncover. But knowing the difference there between Bitcoin and Ethereum, how it's all underpinned by the blockchain, and then there's some potential hazards, at least when it comes to transactions. Because if you're really trying to scale and you're trying to get hundreds of transactions occurring at the same time, there could be some room for opportunities there. Yeah, well, we go back to that. Remember, we said centralization versus decentralization, right? Centralization, in this way, Visa processes 3,000 transactions a second, and 3 to 4, and they can go up. They say they can go up to 60, 70,000, right? And that's faster. It's all on a centralized server. It's on a database, and it's kind of like, easier to do. If I told the 3 of us to do something quickly and we were all in the same room, it would be easier. Now, without technology, what if I'm in Florida, Rolando's in New York, Dave's in Jersey? Now we have to coordinate. It's just slower, right? It would be maybe more secure, potentially. But so that's what happens as you decentralize things. And so there's this, what's this word I'm looking for? When you do like from decentralization to centralization, not well, you're coalescing, or you're kind of putting things all in one basket. You're amassing. I'm looking for like a line when somebody says it's a something. I feel like I'm playing a game show now. When it's like charades.
What is extrapolate?
No, when you're saying on a scale, not a scale. Yeah, it's a scale of centralized to decentralized. There's always trade-offs along that that world. Interesting. Dave, you think we want to go straight into crypto, or did we want to explore this topic a little further?
I just wanted to ask, so with the amount of transactions that you can do at one time in a second on the blockchain, if they could do more, do you think that would make it a little bit more mainstream for some of these larger institutions like Visa, for example?
Yeah, well, Visa had a great announcement with a stable coin called USDC. So a stable coin, as you can imagine, is exactly what it sounds like. It's usually stable and or pegged to an asset, a real world asset. In this case, most stable coins are pegged to the US dollar.
Yep.
So as you know, other cryptos are very volatile. So somebody might say, well, it's going up and down. They don't understand. Why am I putting value in this thing? It just dropped by 80% last year. What am I doing? So what Visa is saying, Visa settles traditionally how they settle. And then they partnered with USDC, which is basically to say, you can hold on your Visa card USDC, this stable coin. You can purchase goods with it, and you can settle it on the USDC network, which basically is instant and final. So Visa's like, well, this is great. We still get to keep people in this network, but we don't have to, and the fees here are a lot lower. It's faster, all those good things that come along with crypto, but not everybody has it. So, yeah.
Well,
so
that's what I also wanted to touch on, the aspect of not everybody has it. So obviously there's a lot of large institutions jumping into the game, but a lot of business occurs on the SMB side. Like you're talking Visa, MasterCard, Amex, e-commerce transactions occur within those players, and there's fees that are incurred. So if I'm a seller selling goods online, if you can offer me something that gets my fees to go down from 3, 4, 5%, which is what you're paying these cards to sell stuff, down to 0.5% or less, why wouldn't I want to do that?
Right, and that's why Visa will smartly try to keep it within their ecosystem, because they don't want you leaving completely, right? And Dave, to go back to your early point about transaction speeds, there sometimes there's basically a company called FTX, which is an exchange. They have an exchange in the US now, and they're running on Solana. So Solana is essentially, what they're trying to do is go high on transactions. And so with that comes, there's some trade-offs. Some of these exchanges and some of these non-custodial exchanges are a little bit more lax on the KYC AML, which is why they're not available to US citizens, therefore US banks. So in order to sell crypto to US citizens, in this example, you have to achieve a very high hurdle rate that the SEC, the CFTC sets for you, FINRA kind of sets. So that's why Coinbase, there's only a few, right? Coinbase, Gemini, a few others that are able to do that. So you'll see a lot of the lower standard for KYC AML that big banks just can't deal with are a little bit outside of the US. Switzerland does a really good job of this, but it's going to start to come together, right? But I think a lot of the regulatory hurdles will still remain, because nobody knows the answer.
Well, I think I want to also piggyback a little bit on what you just said and take just one step back on crypto to give folks that may not be as up on the crypto side a little. Here we're going to play some sound on what cryptocurrency is. Let folks digest that, and we'll come back on the other side, Adam.
Okay.
All right.
In 2009, Bitcoin, the first cryptocurrency, was born. Bitcoin is digital, meaning there's no physical coin you can touch or hold. But it is different from the digital money you spend shopping online. Bitcoin is what is known as a decentralized digital currency. That means there are no banks, government, or other intermediaries overseeing these transactions.
All right. So no governments. So no Federal Reserve, no FDIC, no Wells Fargo.
Right.
What happened? Does it all disappear, or does the U.S. SEC and all the other regulatory agents step in and say, "Hey, no, you got to still run this stuff to us"?
Look, this is the ultimate question, right? Can governments stop Bitcoin? And right, like the video had it right. So basically, it starts from Satoshi Nakamoto sending value. It's kind of like if Rolando and Dave started sending Davecoin 10 years ago, and now everybody uses Davecoin. And yeah, the assumption here is that we trust it in the same way that really all we're doing is trusting the US government and the IOUs. So it's still a trust assumption. There's just a fundamental difference between, and it's going to come out, which is, what is money? Is money, right? Is right now, we think that money is is done by the state. Right, so this is that it's done by the state. It's given to people by the state, and the state controls the money.
Right.
Right now, this wasn't always the case. Right, if you go back to like Austrian economics and this guy F.A. Hayek, he's basically saying in the 70s, currencies, like anything else, should compete and keep it open, and the best currency will win over time. The hardest currency, right? All of the properties Bitcoin has with scarcity, right? Security, all of these things, transferability. All right, it's easier to carry on a plane in your phone than a massive gold bar, for instance. Right, and in this case, it is outside of the. It's not minted. It is not anything through the federal government, through a government of any sort. So the question could be, can a government stop this? You'll see people trying to do this. So if you're familiar with what's going on in India, they can ban certain aspects of it, right? So India is banning Bitcoin essentially. They're banning crypto exchanges, the holding of it, right? The trading of it, all of this stuff. And they're very nervous because they don't want, right? They worked really hard, if you remember a few years ago, when they criminalized holding $10,000 rupee notes. So they said, hey, everyone, you have like 4 weeks, turn in, I mean, in a country of 1.23 billion people, turn in your notes and convert them to this other note, right? So that was incredibly challenging. But what they're trying to do there is to get more people into the tax system, because India is synonymous for having a lot of people that are existing outside of the tax or financial system. So good if they're providing services, bad if it's just used to, track. And so it's always a trade-off. But I don't know. I think certain governments can say, like, you can't, so here's what they could say. If you are a company in our jurisdiction and you have built your company in association with our laws, we're making it unlawful for you to accept cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin. It's against the law. We will lock you up by the force of guns. Oof. That is totally possible. I don't think it's going in that direction. I think it's going in the direction of openness. If it goes in that direction, we have other problems as a society. Other than that, I mean, that would be massive clamping down on ingenuity and innovation. So we would have big problems.
That raises some. That's an interesting part to the question that I had, and my question was around Bitcoin and crypto as it relates to small to medium businesses. So what you're saying is, if we've built a business based on using a currency registered within the United States, yeah, I could see how they may they have the potential to make a rules to kibosh us being able to use something like crypto or Bitcoin.
Or they'll say, we're going to take our cut, right? I mean, or they're going to do some version.
We want our fee.
We want our fee.
Yeah.
And at a large scale, a massive government that has power and the guns and the people and the IRS in this case can do that. And so they have to run a fine line between doing that and stamping out innovation. So they have their own little levers to pull on how much do we tax and or invade in, because if they make it supremely unattractive, right? The United States is not immune to this. If they make it supremely unattractive to have innovation here and somewhere else, and now it's a competition, right? Another country will say, Canada, we're super open, everybody, come create it over here, or Mexico, or somewhere in the world, Switzerland. So we're not immune to that. And I think our leaders would hopefully, I'll stay quiet.
We'll see about that. But I want to touch on something that you said about Mexico, because I heard recently that Amazon is playing in this field and they are establishing a digital currency for Mexico. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard that, but it makes total sense. It's kind of like what they might run into some regulatory hurdles, but that was the original Libra type of scenario, right?
Yes.
Like if you go to China, right? You go to China and you go within WeChat, you're in there. That is, you do everything from WeChat. You're banking, you're gardening, you're whatever, you're hiring people right and left, you're sending money. So it's all within that ecosystem. And that's and all they would have to do is have a digital version of a yuan instead of whatever they're using now, right? So Libra was attempting to do something similar to that. So I think you'll see these ecosystems start to have their own currencies potentially. Right. I mean, then it starts to act as like, Beyonce, right? Beyonce could have Beyonce coin. And then she has the first 5,000 people that are super fans sign up for get an NFT is super, super scarce. And you can only listen to the song once. I don't know, just making it up. And then you can only pay with these tokens that are acquired through doing things in Beyonce's ecosystem. So, and you can see while that makes sense for Amazon as well. The question becomes, how does it go outside of that system?
Yeah, well, and I think that Amazon also may be looking at it because for what you're saying, the regulation hurdles, like you're saying, Canada's super open, come on down. And because Mexico may still want that innovation. They want the development of the infrastructure and the heavy lifting to be done, so that if some other company wants to pay for that and get that going, well, yeah, go ahead, bring it to Mexico, where there's a lot less entrenched interest than maybe here. You know, the financial system here is built on a lot of investment banking and what have you to make the system go round. And
yeah. Well, just to add on to that, one of the things that going back to NFTs, right? So what NFTs are going to completely disrupt is this basic premise, right? So you're doing this podcast, right? And we're doing this podcast. 10 years ago, somebody comes on, I want to do a video. YouTube says, you know what, Adam, we got you. Record a video, put it onto our platform. We'll do everything else, and we will basically get it to your customer. What nobody really thought of at that point was that the creator is beholden now to the platform to get their stuff out there, and they then have to compete against millions of other people, millions of views, and every time this grows, their optionality for getting paid and how the algorithm works, keeping up with it, is insane. So what they're going to do is now saying, here, I'm a creator. Are you a fan? Come to my platform, come to my ecosystem, and it will, over time, dilute the Facebooks, at least in the media. I don't know how Amazon works. It's different in the physical goods world, but at least as far as creators in the digital economy.
Well, I think from the Amazon perspective, we play in that world pretty heavily. Yeah. There's goods there, but at least from a digital currency perspective, if Amazon, because I know in Mexico, and I'm sure other parts of the world, when you're talking about verifying funds and who's got what, and do you actually have that in your bank, and trying to establish that transaction because of the actual currency manipulation or different things that are getting in the way, and you just have this transparent way of saying, okay, yeah, you do have that in your Amazon account. You have digital Amazon coins, and I'll take that and I'll send you the good. You get rid of the payment problem that you would have on an online marketplace.
Yep.
So fascinating. You were going to say something, Dave?
No, there's so much information to digest. When I think about Bitcoin, I think about bringing my kids to the arcade. We used to be able to put quarters in the games. Yep. And now you either trade your US dollar for tokens, or they load it all up on a card. And it's like they're controlling what kind of currency is being put into the machine.
Yeah.
Interesting. I want to go into this other area that we haven't really touched on. We've talked a little about it, is the blockchain itself. So for folks that you've heard of blockchain or may have not understand what it is, I just want to play a little bit of footage on the blockchain. Do we have that, Ori? Yeah, we could show the Reuters guide. So Reuters had a little graphic there on the blockchain and what it is, and you can see this. It's basically a lot of little bytes of information that all come together on a ledger, like you explained, and then it gets bundled up and it lives on this ledger, so it's transparent. Go ahead, scroll down, Ori. There's a little bit more. There we go. It gets all put together, and it becomes a record of custody, like you were talking about, that is accessible and visible and transparent. And both parties have been identified, or the thing or asset or digital good has been identified. It lives and breathes on there. And so now you don't have the manipulation that you would have with a currency that you can have today, or the counterfeiting, which is another problem, or and you could talk more about this, like people, breaking into Visa and taking somebody's account, like you were saying, and maybe Amex or Wells Fargo, and now they have access to your account. So it's a very secure way of doing business.
Without a doubt. It again, always has trade-offs, right? There's a reason, but you can look at it. So start with the security, right? So if In a bank, the bank usually has server farms, like basically a big group of servers, like somewhere, right? Or they have it like two different places, right? They'll have one and they'll have a second one, 100 miles from there. And why do they do that? They're saying, hey, if there's a hurricane or a tornado or something, if this database center gets wrecked, this data center gets wrecked, we need a backup data center.
Right.
So in that same way, that's like a honeypot for hackers. The hackers know exactly where the stuff is. And what you do is here's the server, and IT security usually acts as this. Here's the stuff, and dig a moat. And this is very familiar to how we, protect in our fairy tales, right? Here, the princess or the prince is up in the castle, dig a moat. And like they didn't think of dragons that could like fly in and burn the village.
Burn the whole place.
but I mean, that was the idea, right? Keep the crown jewels in the center and then basically protect the center. And that extends into IT security today. What Bitcoin is saying for the security aspect is it's going to exist on like everywhere. So, and it sounds counterintuitive. It's like, well, if it's existing everywhere, what are you going to hack? But you would basically, in this world, say there's block 1. You see that roll?
Yep.
Here's block 1. If you needed to get to transaction 1 and you're at transaction 100, you would have to hack into an incredibly difficult algorithm at number 100, 99, 98, 97, 96,
To then
95.
get the 1.
Right. And so you without the full story, it wouldn't make any sense to you.
Well,
so
it's very difficult because what you're saying is that you've built multiple layers of security, whereas something that is standalone, it's not a standalone. Number 1 is bundled in with all of these other bits, right? 1 through 100, like you're saying. So you'd have to take them all apart to eventually get to 1.
Some version of that.
Yeah, and it's so difficult to do, and that it's decentralized. It's everywhere. So you'd have to take everything out.
Some version of that. Yeah. So
right?
From a security perspective, it's much better. That's right.
Yeah, much better. Cool. So go ahead. You can.
Oh, and you were saying, so the other property was around transparency, right? So so the best way to put that is think of we'll use Bitcoin as an example, right? So the Bitcoin network has never been hacked. Stuff that has been built on Bitcoin has been hacked, but the Bitcoin network itself has not been hacked.
Interesting.
In order to do that, you would have to have control of 51% of the validators. That's called a 51% attack. And as Bitcoin gets stronger, it becomes cost prohibitive to hack the network. You're talking. The only way at this point that it would happen is if like the United States, like every government in the world agreed to get on board, and try to hack it financially.
Yeah.
But knowing governments, I don't think they're fully on board and would have the skill set to do that. So that's from that. And as far as like the transparency of the transactions, think of Ledger. It's now not held by a single bank. And this is what happens, right? Clients like Enron can cook the books, and they have their books and they're just providing them, right? What you would end up doing is basically doing like a shared ledger that acts almost like a big Excel spreadsheet that everybody has access to, or like a big Sunday crossword that everybody has access to. And if you make a change, so if it's a 3-letter house animal and you write cat, but they really wanted dog, everybody would see you write cat, would see you cross out cat and write dog at the same time. So this is, basically Chris Giancarlo, the former chairman of the CFTC, was saying, if we had this in 2008, the financial crisis would not be as big as it would have been, because we would have seen this coming and been able to track and trace it. There's another component of it. You'll hear all associated with like the dark web, Silk Road, and nefarious activity. It actually becomes more easy to track things digital, right? This is why China is so on board with this. And the negative side is like, right, China wants everything on chain. They want to be able to track everything. And so
they're big on that.
they're huge, right? In this case, cash is the biggest money laundered currency in the world, right?
Right.
But if it's on chain, you can do more like forensic discovery on chain. So I'll pause there.
I can't understand why the U.S. government, from that standpoint, wouldn't want to get on board, simply because the U.S. dollar is one of the most counterfeited currencies out there.
I think I
take that out of the equation.
I think I know why. So one of my great friends is like one of the top DeFi lawyers, and so I think it's some version of and I am not the expert here, but I think it's some version of there's this massive global pact on sharing information for like identifiable information for companies, and who's the one country that does that? The United States. So basically, you can set up a shell company in Delaware that you don't really know who runs that shell company. So in a lot of ways, the money laundering aspect that we think of is, I think of like something out of the Bourne Supremacy or something.
Or Narcos.
Or Narcos, right? Exactly. Or Ozark. But it's really the large ones are being able to set up massive companies that nobody knows who owns. And that is really only possible in the United States. So we're a big proponent of this. So because all of that revenue from these companies comes over, we're able to, right, tax it on some level. We just don't want anybody to know who it is.
So it's about being anonymous then.
There's a lot of, the anonymity of money in this is not to be understated. I mean, that is one of the massive, massive things. And that's another reason. So it's and people are a little scared of the anonymity. But Bitcoin is not completely anonymous. It's pseudonymous. So you could find out who is connected to that private key, but you'll hear protocols like Monero or Zcash or Dash that are privacy coins. These are usually these are truly private, and people will get very scared about those.
Wow. Fascinating. I'm fascinated.
Yeah. It's great stuff. Come on down the rabbit hole. 2 days from now, you'll be an expert.
I love it. You know, we may have to bring you on again because there's so much more I want to touch on, and we could spend maybe 4 hours talking about this and make it a webinar and all that stuff.
It's awesome.
But I think we have enough to start
the
conversation for folks to engage, and leave enough out there, still enough room for like a part 2 or 3 and 4, like make it a series.
There's plenty of room. Great resources are like Andreessen Horowitz's Crypto Canon. They have a crypto startup school that's great at Andreessen Horowitz. Multicoin Capital is fantastic for their, candidly, full disclosure, I'm an LP at Multicoin. So they're a crypto only hedge fund, and they are incredible. They have some really great thought pieces that explains this stuff really, really well. And the internet is your friend.
All right. Well, let's talk about friendly stuff now. Let's go into this rapid fire questions. These are all friendly questions about about Adam, so that folks can come away from this and say, oh, I get what makes him tick. So Adam, what's your favorite musician or musical group right now or all time?
Beatles.
Well, there you go. No question.
No question.
Final answer.
Final answer.
All right. Awesome. The Beatles it is. Isn't that a good group, Dave?
It's one of the best. My 15-year-old is getting into Beatles, and he's been playing all this music that I really like instead of me saying, turn that off. And he says, does this remind you of your childhood? I'm like, it reminds me of my childhood. It also reminds my father, your grandfather, of his childhood. So it goes way back. But
Dave, I'll add a little bit here, because the Beatles is like my aspirational answer in a way. My real answer is a genre of music that I like called yacht rock, which is basically every 1970s slow jam from like Ambrosia and Kenny Loggins.
Well, if you like Pandora, they have a yacht rock station.
Oh, I'm on it.
There you go. All right. What's your favorite app on your phone right now?
Let me look at my phone. I'll tell you. That's a good question. I think my favorite app is my Helium app. There's a crypto Helium, and I've bought a hotspot, and that means you can kind of basically mine tokens.
You're
so
mining tokens.
I'm mining, yeah, a little bit. So I like
I'd
helium.
love to bring you. I'd love to bring you back just to talk about mining tokens. I
Oh,
hear a
God.
lot about that. I don't
Yeah.
know enough to even talk about it.
Yeah, the quick thing with mining is I'll give you what mining is on Bitcoin, right, in 2 seconds.
Sure.
So all mining is on Bitcoin is an economic incentive for people to keep the security of the network. What does that mean? That means Rolando and Dave are going to try to guess at a massive math problem that only a computer can solve, right? So you'll just, it's an arms race for computing power. And if you win that, you get the right to publish a transaction and you get a reward or a block reward. So what does mining mean? So I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 100. Rolando, I give you 2 dice. Dave, I give you 1 die. Who's got a better chance of guessing my number?
Rolando.
Correct. That's all mining is just computing power thrown at it a lot, and whoever's got more power can guess more times to get the right answer to then get this reward.
And which would be coins?
In that case, it's Bitcoin, yeah. And that's called that's called proof of work.
Proof of work. And so the reward is Bitcoin, and the value of Bitcoin keeps rising. So having Bitcoins can be very valuable as the value obviously keeps escalating.
Correct. And it could go down, but yeah, it's on the up and up right now.
It's on the up and up. Awesome. Okay, now mining. I'm informed about mining. Now, favorite food?
Sushi.
No, sushi. Good stuff.
We finally got a seafood answer. I've been waiting every single time I'm hearing spaghetti. I like Mexican. I'm like, someone's gonna say seafood eventually.
Sushi, yeah, seafood and sushi is top. It's really just a conduit to get wasabi, ginger, and soy sauce into my body as quickly as possible.
You like the torture. That's what I hear.
I love it.
Quick
All right. And then the last one here. What's your preferred? It's a multiple choice. What's your preferred method of communication? Email, text, phone call, instant, or direct message?
I'd say it's like either a text, Telegram, or Signal. I would even prefer Signal or Telegram.
Okay. So you like talking?
I just prefer. It depends, right? So preferred method of communication for actual communication, I would say like a phone call. But for updates and things like that and planning, I would say text. So Signal or Telegram.
Signal. All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, now we know a lot more about Adam than we knew before.
That's true.
And absolutely. And I want to thank Adam for coming on and being a wonderful guest. But before we close this down,
you're paying me in Bitcoin? Is that right?
Yeah, I'm mining right now as we talk.
Exactly.
So we can get you some Bitcoin. Before we wrap, we do have a trivia question. Wait. Before we go to trivia question, if people want to follow you, Adam, where can they go and follow you and keep track of what you're doing and what you're putting out? Where should people go?
Sure, just Adam Mastrelli on LinkedIn, and then Twitter is at Adam Mastrelli. Pretty straightforward.
Okay, awesome. And so let's go to the trivia. I've been talking about the trivia. Let's go to that before we hit the other stuff, Ori.
I don't know if I know the answer.
No, there we go. Adam Mastrelli on LinkedIn. Adam Mastrelli
get the whole thing
Twitter.
going, man.
Awesome. There you go. He's quick on the draw there. Ori's
really
on it. So he's great. All right, Dave, take it away.
So Adam, we're gonna throw this over to you. You know, we were talking about the artwork that Beeple sold for 60 some odd million on NFT. So for this famous painting by Leonardo da Vinci, how much do you think this masterpiece? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a guess on this and say C, 235 million. But if it could very well be 450.
All right, so throw up the answer, Ori. Ooh.
Oh my God! Wow, that's wild.
I don't know how many Bitcoin that is, but that's some coin for sure.
That's some coin. That is some coin. My God, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Wow.
Yeah.
So
those guys have money.
So they're talking about this being widely publicized, just like the artwork from Beeple. I'm sure that Beeple will be something that we'll all be talking about for the rest of history.
Totally. Absolutely.
For sure. So if you happen to like what we talked about today, you like Adam and what he had to share in this content, I want to invite you to like, share, and subscribe, get notification, hit all the bells and whistles, all that
Destroy
good
that
stuff.
like button. Destroy it.
Yes, hit them all. And you will get nuggets that we push out regularly that are not on our regular Tuesday podcast. So go ahead and get that, and you'll be notified when we may release a little something extra over time with Adam and other guests that you'll only see when you get that notification. Gents, do we have any final parting words or anything else that you want to say before we wrap up?
Adam, thank you so much. You know what? You really shed some light on a lot of topics and things that I will have to go back and do some additional research on, but it was very helpful, very informative.
Thank you. Well, look, when we're all still learning, so when you have questions, I'm going to not know the answer, so we'll all keep going. You are a great duo here. Great show, great hosts, and from one MC to two others, it's been a pleasure.
No, it's been awesome, Adam. I'm glad you came on, educated us, provided some value add to our audience, and we will bid you farewell, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time, guys.
Thanks.
Okay.